Missiles over Doha. Iran strikes U.S. base in Qatar in retaliation for nuclear facility bombings, explosions reported over Qatar. A crisis unfolds in real time. Explosions have been heard over Doha, Qatar. Missiles have reportedly been launched at Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Corps, IRGC, has confirmed that it carried out the attack as a direct response to the U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend, in response to what was described by U.S. officials as a credible and imminent threat. The U.S. Embassy in Qatar issued a shelter-in-place order to American citizens earlier in the day. Just hours later, Iran launched missiles targeting U.S. military sites in Qatar, Iraq, Bahrain, and Kuwait. What began as a brewing diplomatic storm has now erupted into open military confrontation. How the events unfolded tonight. As night fell over Doha, tension in the region peaked. Around 6 p.m. local time, American personnel and citizens received emergency alerts from the U.S. Embassy urging them to stay indoors and avoid all unnecessary travel. By 6:30 p.m., Qatari authorities had closed national airspace, and flights were being diverted from Hamad International Airport. The airspace lockdown was a clear indication that something larger was imminent. Just after 8 p.m., explosions lit up the sky above the Qatari capital, and within minutes, AFP and BBC reporters confirmed missile activity over the region. The target was identified: Al Udeid Air Base, located southwest of Doha, which houses more than 10,000 U.S. and allied forces and functions as the regional hub for air operations in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. By 8:45 p.m., Iranian state television confirmed that 6 missiles had been launched at the base. This was followed by a statement from Iran's Supreme National Security Council noting that the strike was a measured and symbolic response to the 6 precision bombs reportedly used by the U.S. in its earlier attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Why Al Udeid was targeted. Al Udeid Air Base is one of the most significant military facilities outside the continental United States. Used extensively by U.S. Central Command, it houses strategic aircraft, including F-22 Raptors, surveillance drones, and aerial refueling tankers. The base has long been considered a key launch point for U.S. operations across the Middle East. According to military analysts, Iran's choice to target Al Udeid sends a very specific message. We can reach your most fortified positions. That message was delivered with precision and timing meant to maximize both military and political impact. Iran claims it took precautions to avoid civilian casualties, emphasizing that only military assets were targeted. However, the psychological effect of explosions near a densely populated capital like Doha cannot be understated. Simultaneous strikes across the region. The strike on Qatar was part of a broader coordinated retaliation campaign by Iran. In Iraq, 2 missiles were launched at Al-Assad Air Base, another key U.S. military installation. Both were reportedly intercepted by the base's missile defense system, according to Iraqi military sources. At nearly the same time, missile alerts were triggered in Bahrain and Kuwait, both home to American military assets. While Iranian officials did not initially confirm these additional strikes, multiple regional defense networks confirmed launches consistent with Iran's known missile types. The full extent of the damage remains unverified at the time of reporting. This kind of regional retaliation closely mirrors Iran's actions in January 2020, when it launched ballistic missiles at U.S. forces following the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. That retaliation also began with a limited strike, followed by multiple waves in the hours that followed. Why Iran is striking back. Now Iran's leadership has made it clear that the latest U.S. attacks on its nuclear infrastructure crossed a red line. According to Iranian government officials, the U.S. violated both international sovereignty and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action framework by bombing undisclosed nuclear facilities. Tehran has called the move an act of war and an existential threat. The 6 missile response is seen not just as a counterstrike, but also as a message to the world. Iran will not remain passive in the face of U.S. aggression. Furthermore, the IRGC statement emphasized that this operation, dubbed Tidings of Victory, was a measured act, suggesting that more could come if provoked further. Global fallout. How the world is responding. President Donald Trump, reportedly inside the White House Situation Room as the attacks began, has not yet made a public statement. However, White House officials have confirmed that Trump is in close communication with both military advisors and regional partners. In the hours following the missile strikes, Brent crude oil prices spiked over 6% as concerns mounted about potential disruptions to global oil supply from the Persian Gulf. Qatar Airways, the nation's flagship carrier, announced widespread delays and reroutes to ensure the safety of passengers. Stock markets in Asia opened with losses, particularly in energy, travel, and manufacturing sectors. Israel, often considered a flashpoint in U.S.-Iran tensions, raised its military readiness level, though it has not yet been targeted. The United Nations Security Council has scheduled an emergency session in response to the escalation. Both Russia and China have urged restraint but criticized the initial U.S. strike as a destabilizing act. NATO leadership is monitoring the situation closely, with discussions underway about potential joint responses should the conflict expand. What happens next? Experts are split on whether this is the start of a larger war or a controlled exchange of symbolic blows. If the U.S. responds militarily again, Iran may escalate its retaliation to include regional allies and potentially launch cyber attacks or mobilize proxy groups in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. But if the U.S. holds back, perhaps using diplomatic channels through neutral countries like Oman or Switzerland, there is still a window to de-escalate. In 2020, Iran's missile retaliation against U.S. bases was ultimately contained after several waves, with no U.S. deaths reported. Whether this new situation follows a similar pattern or turns into a wider conflict may depend on what happens in the next 24 to 72 hours. Final thought. This is not a routine military skirmish. It's a direct exchange of force between two powerful nations. For the first time since 2020, U.S. bases across multiple countries have been struck nearly simultaneously by Iranian missiles. Civilians are sheltering. Military forces are mobilizing. Diplomats are scrambling. And as President Trump remains sequestered in the Situation Room, the world watches and waits. This is a moment that will be studied in history books. The question is, will it be remembered as the spark that led to a diplomatic breakthrough or the ignition of something far worse? Thanks for watching.